Hello, and welcome to this presentation by ChangePoint Technologies on test-driven development in Agile projects. In this presentation, we'll use one of our projects to give you a real-world introduction into test-driven development. First, we'll talk about the issues being faced by the client in their existing process. Next, we'll give you a detailed overview of what TDD exactly is. Then, we'll talk about how the client integrated TDD into their project. And finally, we'll talk about the benefits they saw after using TDD. The first thing ChangePoint did was to try and understand the client's existing process. We found that the client follows roughly a 5-stage process in their Agile project. In stage 1, the product's features were first discussed between the product owners and the business analysts. In stage 2, business analysts then drafted user stories from the agreed feature list. In stage 3, technical architects reviewed these user stories, then either accepted them as is, rejected them outright, or requested changes to these user stories. In stage 4, the dev and testing teams also reviewed the stories, and again accepted them as is, rejected them outright, or requested some changes to them. Finally, in stage 5, stories that had passed through all of the above stages were finally estimated and taken for development. To get a better understanding of the issues and challenges in the existing process, we talked to the different stakeholders in the project. First, we talked to the product managers. They felt that due to this multi-stage review process, features that were envisioned at the roadmap stage were often simplified or even de-scoped by the time they reached sprint planning. This meant going back on promises to customers. They felt user stories that contain requirements, business rules, and validations become very difficult to understand, and hence give feedback on the story once a feature gets complex. Next, we talked to the architects and developers. They said, "We don't have complete details of the requirements till the implementation phase. This means insufficient time for gap and impact analysis." Insufficient analysis time also meant they were not confident in their estimates, and some stories inevitably ended up requiring rework. They also felt large and complex user stories could not be easily split into tasks across multiple resources. This meant one resource was usually a bottleneck for such stories. And finally, they felt some of their developers were sometimes overwhelmed by the scope of some stories. They felt they are much more productive when focusing on one scenario or one feature per task. Next, we talked to the testing team. They also said we don't have complete details of the requirements till implementation phase. This meant insufficient time to thoroughly document the test cases. They also felt due to the nature of the modules in the system, some user stories were too large and complex. It was easy to miss testing scenarios and implicit business rules and validations. And finally, the user story format used in the project did not allow for easy conversion into test cases to be used in an automation testing tool. And some points that were common across all stakeholders were, everybody felt there was poor alignment and collaboration between all project members. They had low confidence in the quality and stability of the platform, and they were apprehensive about adding new features to the system in the fear of breaking the system. Based on our interviews with the client stakeholders, two things became very clear. One, everyone felt there was very little collaboration between the stakeholders in the project. And two, everyone had low confidence in the quality and stability of the system. Based on these inputs, we felt a test-driven development model with an emphasis on collaboration was the correct fit for this client's project. So what is test-driven development, or TDD? TDD is a software development methodology where the tests for a new software feature or functionality are written before the actual implementation. TDD is usually envisioned as a 3-step cycle. In step 1, the developer writes the test for the new feature. In most TDD descriptions, this first step is often described as write a failing test. While the new test will fail the first time they are run, because the new feature has not been implemented yet, the intention is not to implement failure. Rather, the developer is attempting to describe the behavior of the system based on adding this new feature. In step 2, the developer will write the minimum possible code to make the new test cases pass. The developer's focus should be on passing the tests instead of quality and design of the code. In step 3, the new implementation code is refactored to improve the design, quality, and readability without affecting behavior. These steps are intentionally illustrated as a cycle. TDD provides its best results when the features, tests, and resulting implementation are continuously revisited and refined. This approach fits seamlessly into Agile projects, where features are built, tested, and enhanced in recurring cycles. So how did this client adopt TDD into their project? Well, first, we emphasize to the client that open collaboration between all stakeholders, right from the requirement stage, was critical to the success of their project. To incorporate TDD into their Agile project with an emphasis on collaboration, we recommended that they follow a workflow as follows. In stage 1, requirement workshops should be organized as open discussions that include all stakeholders of the project, e.g. product owners, technical architects, business analysts, developers, and testers. In these workshops, stakeholders should be encouraged to ask questions to uncover all use cases and scenarios for each system feature. Stage 2. Once the collaboration is actively happening, the next step is to record the feature-level scenarios in a meaningful way. This documentation should be understandable by all stakeholders and allow them to easily provide feedback. Stage 3. For a given feature, developers will create unit tests from the documented scenarios. Testers will create system-level tests for the same scenarios. In stage 4, the developers will implement the scenarios with just enough code to make the unit test pass. In stage 5, the developers will refactor their code to meet design and quality guidelines. Testers can try to incorporate their test cases into an automation tool if it is appropriate for the feature and will add value to the process. And finally, the above stages should be repeated in a continuous cycle of review and refinement. So how do we capture the scenarios that were discussed during the requirement workshops? Well, ideally, we would like to capture the features and scenarios in a format that can be easily understood by all stakeholders, but at the same time can be easily converted into test cases for test-driven development. One popular format for TDD is a semi-structured language called Gherkin. Let's take a look at an example. Suppose you're developing a game and the stakeholders have called a workshop to discuss the rules around scoring. The example shown in the slide is a sample Gherkin document that details the scenarios for this feature. The document contains the following sections: the title of the feature being specified, the key acceptance criteria and/or business rules for the feature, and finally the individual scenarios related to scoring. Here we see the power of open collaboration. If all stakeholders are encouraged to explore the different rules and scenarios related to scoring, we are able to capture the majority of the happy path, sad path, and edge cases scenarios in this Gherkin spec. Now let's look at an individual Gherkin scenario. A Gherkin scenario normally contains 3 clauses: given, when, and then. Given defines the current state of the system before the user or system executes the scenario. When describes the actions undertaken by the user or system. And finally, then describes the observable and unseen results of the user's actions on the system. So what are the advantages of using Gherkin? Gherkin is an attractive specification format for test-driven projects because documenting features as scenarios naturally encourages the team to adopt a test-first mindset. Gherkin specifications are written in plain language that can be understood by both technical and non-technical audiences. Gherkin uses certain keywords, as we saw in the previous slide, such as given, when, then, to demarcate individual scenarios. This means scenarios and tests can be imported into an automation testing tool with little or no modification to the original specification. A popular automation tool for Gherkin is a tool known as Cucumber. So what was the client's experience after incorporating TDD and Gherkin into their project? Well, again, we talked to the different stakeholders to get their feedback. The product managers liked it because feature discussion involved all stakeholders right from the beginning. Thus, any features that had to be modified or descoped were known upfront before promising anything to customers. They also felt that documenting the features in Gherkin meant it was easy to understand the specs and also give feedback on those specs. Next, we talked to the architects and developers. They also liked it because they had the visibility of the requirements right from the beginning. The feature workshops allowed them to highlight edge cases and technical limitations before any work was formally estimated. Scenario-level requirements meant team leaders could assign a feature across multiple resources and thus avoid resource bottlenecks. Finally, every developer worked on one scenario at a time, and TDD forced them to think in terms of test first. This allowed the developer to focus on one piece of functionality at a time rather than trying to digest a user story for an entire screen. Next, we talked to the testers, and they also liked it because they also had visibility of the requirements right from the beginning. The feature workshops allowed them to understand both the functional and technical scenarios, and this helped them in quantifying the amount of validation work required for each feature. Scenario-level requirements automatically served as a starting point for each test case. And since scenarios were documented in Gherkin, it was easy for them to import these test cases into an automated testing tool like Cucumber. Finally, common points across all stakeholders were there was marked improvement in collaboration across all stakeholders. Confidence in the quality and stability of the platform rose dramatically since all stakeholders knew that majority of the scenarios were uncovered during the requirement stage itself. The team was also more confident to add new features to the product. If a new feature broke something, it would automatically be reflected in the existing tests, thus making debugging very easy. TDD is more than just validating the correctness of your system's functionality. It can also drive the design of your system. If your organization uses a continuous integration development model, TDD ensures that the testing modules are built directly into your model, and this allows you to make changes to the application without fear of breaking the system. TDD requires developers to think of the software in terms of small units that can be written and tested independently and integrated together later. This leads to smaller, more focused classes, looser coupling, and cleaner interfaces. The result is a code base that is modular, flexible, and extensible. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation on TDD given by ChangePoint Technologies, and we hope it gives you a better understanding of whether or not TDD is a good fit for your organization. If you want to find out more, please do reach out to us at www.changepoint.com. Thank you.